stabbing, a 17-year-old boy arrested after injury. This was 2 hours ago. After you get the London stabbing, you get this as well. Disgusting behaviour.
My name is Dan Thorpe and I'm an Assistant Chief Constable at the South Yorkshire Police. I am joined here today by Victoria Hall, who is Head Teacher at Burley Academy. I'm going to provide a statement about today's incident and then Victoria will deliver a statement as well. Due to the fact we have a suspect in custody and proceedings are active, I'm afraid we are not in a position to be able to take any questions afterwards. Thank you for your understanding. At 8:50 a.m. this morning, we were called to reports that 3 people had been injured during an incident at Burley Academy. Our officers attended the scene and within minutes of the initial call, we had arrested a 17-year-old boy on suspicion of attempted murder. He remains in police custody. The 3 victims of this incident, 2 adults and a child, suffered minor injuries and were checked over at the scene by colleagues from Yorkshire Ambulance Service. The 2 adults both suffered minor injuries, one from a sharp object which is believed to be broken glass. The child was assaulted and thankfully has no visible injuries, but I know this will have been a frightening ordeal for everyone involved. I would like to take this opportunity to praise the Academy staff for the actions they took this morning to help keep the school community safe. We are working very closely with the Academy and our partners and will continue to do so in the coming days and weeks. Burley is a close-knit community and while these events concluded in a swift arrest, it will no doubt cause ongoing concern. Our officers will remain here in Burley for the rest of today and in the coming days. If you are worried I would like to discuss what has happened, please do not hesitate to approach officers. We are here for you to make you feel safe in your local area. I'm also aware of some unhelpful content circulating on social media relating to this incident. Please refrain from posting images, footage or speculation on social media as this will be harmful to our investigation. Many thanks for your understanding and cooperation.
I just wanted to thank all of our students and staff who helped manage the situation this morning, and our staff who prioritise the safety and well-being of all of our students. I want to thank our students for their exemplary behaviour and all of the families and local community for their support. The school will be open tomorrow as usual, and we do look forward to seeing our students and families then. Thank you.
Thank you.
For goodness sake.
That was a short press conference.
What is going on in this world?
In the countryside where the weather is fine, it's
bloody adverts. Hate adverts. Ribena. Do you like adverts, people?
Experience cordless freedom with up to 90 minutes runtime.
In the last half an hour, Operation Vector is the name of the government's new crackdown. 800 immigration officers involved across the country, chasing down 5,700 people currently on bail. Will it work, or is it too little, too late? More to the point, is it performative on the eve of elections?
Well, Martin, first of all, it's very good to join you as always. I've always feared that this Rwanda policy is a gimmick, and it's a pretty expensive gimmick at that, frankly. I mean, there's hundreds of millions of pounds that have already been spent on this scheme. If you look at experience, Israel, for example, had a similar deal with Rwanda that it terminated in 2018 because it wasn't working, and that is my real fear around this. Now, of course, we have to tackle this issue of small boats in the English Channel. We really have to do that. But this gimmick, this sort of headline-grabbing way, if you like, of trying to do it, is no substitute for the very hard work that has to be done to crack down on the criminal smuggler gangs.
But you would agree, wouldn't you, that illegal immigration is completely and utterly out of control, Nick. What are the Labour Party going to do? I mean, you talked about having more staff to process them. That's basically what the Conservative Party has just proposed. Cracking down on gangs sounds great, but nobody's managed to achieve that so far. One interesting thing you did talk about, though, Nick Thomas Simmons, was the idea of pairing with a third country to process, and countries that were mentioned included Greece and Turkey. Is that something the Labour Party has got a bit sleeve?
No, our plan is in a number of steps. So first of all, we do want to work internationally to break the model of the criminal smuggler gangs. People do not become refugees in northern France. They've usually travelled very long journeys. Now, what we are saying is that the money that's being allocated to the Rwanda scheme, we will instead spend to create a new unit within the National Crime Agency that will work closely with international partners, not just France, but Belgium, far further afield as well. Also work closely with Europol and go back to a situation where we can share data in real time and actually influence those investigations across the channel. Second, here, we've got to get a better grip of the asylum.
Don't forget to get the video a like.
You go back to 2014, over 80% of cases then were being dealt with.
Thank you, Rockstar. Thank you.
And people were being housed in the accommodation that we've historically used. Instead now we have a backlog way over 100,000 with people in hotels, miserable existence for them, and you're talking £6-7 million a day to the taxpayer, which is totally unacceptable. Thirdly, we need to get returns agreements in place. We'd create a returns unit in the Home Office dedicated to doing that, so that when people are not entitled to be here, they can then be removed. That is a fair system that Labour look to create, both for people in the system and for the British taxpayer.
Nick, would that returns agreement involve some kind of deal with the European Union member states? Because these people are coming from France. We should be sending them back to France. That's where they came from.
Send them back to France.
Country. That's what millions of people think. But any form of deal with France, Macron has said, well, you'd have to go to Brussels.
Send them back to the islands as well.
To do a closer deal with the European Union to sort this out, because that would mean a reciprocal deal where we are duty bound to accept huge numbers across the 27 member states.
No, well, in terms of of course there is important bilateral work with France, first of all. Our law enforcement agencies working very closely with French law enforcement is a really important aspect of policing the situation in the Channel.
But that hasn't worked so far, Nick.
Important, Martin.
That hasn't worked. We spend £500 million a year. It hasn't worked.
Well, in terms of the numbers crossing the Channel, Martin, you're entirely correct in terms of the thousands that are still coming. Doesn't mean, of course, that both our law enforcement and indeed French law enforcement are not stopping even greater numbers. But I agree that the fact that the numbers are continuing as they are shows that you need a more strategic approach in relation to a returns agreement and the European Union. To suggest somehow we'd be taking tens of thousands of people is just frankly utter garbage. If you look at the situation that
make me look cartoon today.
It was called a Dublin 3
cartoon world,
and what it meant was that we had the right to return people to other safe countries, and there was a very limited family reunion safe route. But that is just one aspect of this. We need to be looking at this both at source, busting the criminal smuggler gangs. We need to be looking at the chaos in the Home Office the Conservatives have created, and then the returns agreements as well. So it's a systematic approach. It isn't going to be something that one lever can simply solve.
Okay, Nick, I want to talk to you about knife crime. We have a terrible, terrible, tragic problem with knife crime right across the United Kingdom. We saw in West Streeting's constituency yesterday, now tragically named 14-year-old boy was brutally killed. We saw an incident today in Sheffield in a school, the attempted murder of 3 there. We saw in Wales a couple of weeks ago. We've got a terrible problem with knife crime. If the Labour Party was to get into power, what on earth are you going to do to stamp out this cancer?
Well, look, firstly, I think we'd all be thinking about the families who've been involved in all three incidents that you've mentioned, terrible incidents here in London, in Sheffield, and indeed back in Ammanford in my native Wales. And credit as well, Martin, because I've been on your show previously, I think, debating about the police. Great credit as well for the bravery that our first responders have showed in those three situations. Now, I also think that we have to be looking again at a number of different things. Firstly, we frankly need more police officers, and the next Labour government, if we are privileged enough to form one, will recruit 13,000 more police officers, and we will do that by pooling resources of all the police forces across England and Wales. Well, currently they are separately procuring cars, procuring uniforms and other things. Let's bring that together and use that money, that £360 million, to recruit more frontline officers. But we also need, with regard to knife crime, I think we've been at various stages of banning particular designs of knives since 2016. We need to look again at that to make sure that we are capturing the kind of knives that, firstly, we don't want on our streets, that we don't want traded online either.
Been itching my eyeball.
Crucial things that we need to be doing so that people
been doing that, itching my eye, and it's gone all sore and red. See, look.
You'll know, Martin, that Keir Starmer's spoken about his 5 missions for the next Labour government. Tackling crime, halving. I shouldn't really itch my eyeball, but is absolutely one of those missions and central to making people feel safe on our streets.
Okay, Nick Thomas Simmons, thank you as ever for joining us here on GB News. Always thank you. Thank you.
What game this is? Sleep in my eyeball. Most probably. I don't know what else is on this TV, to be honest. I mean, there's some things on here, but not a lot. Hold on a minute. I need to find more videos. Okay, let's have a look. GB News. What else have they got on here?
Well, the breaking news this hour, the Home Office has now revealed that the first migrants set to be deported to Rwanda have now been detained.
In a series of operations that took place across the country this week. We're seeing them on our screens now. It all comes on the same day as new data revealed that the UK's record levels of immigration have started falling after tighter curbs resulted in a 25% drop in the number of visas issued this year.
Yes, well, for more details, we're joined now by GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White. We're seeing the Home Office, Mark, releasing this footage of the first wave of migrants flagged for the Rwanda deportation scheme, essentially being rounded up, put in the back of vans. Is this PR, or do we get the impression that there are a large number of people now who will be on those flights?
Well, I'm sure that opposition politicians might look at the timing of these raids coming just on the eve of the local elections and be a little bit suspicious. However, regardless of the timings, there is no doubt this is a very significant development after now more than 2 years since Boris Johnson, then Prime Minister,
got my Pac-Man cup over there. You ever played a game called Pac-Man? I got like a cup over there. Ice Valley water. Some people say this is Wales water, but I'm from Sheffield.
There is some movement. Of course, we got that bill last week brought into law now, paving the way for these flights, which the government tells us they're expecting now to take off between 9 and 11 weeks from now, those first flights. So in preparation for that, what you're seeing here are teams from immigration enforcement in operations that are countrywide. rounding up those that they have earmarked for deportation to Rwanda.
Yeah, Pac-Man Cup over
we
there.
were hearing, of course, just the other day that 5,700 individuals had been pre-notified before it got caught up in the courts last year, that they had been singled out for deportation to Rwanda. So those 5,700, or at least those that they can locate, they are now starting to round up.
Pac-Man box and
Mark, it
bag
does
up
seem like they're
the
sort
game.
of shutting the stable.
I played the game before, yeah.
The horse has bolted to some extent here. After all, we were just talking about this yesterday, how there were thousands of those 5,700, perhaps almost 3,000, who had disappeared. Could this be perhaps a Home Office response to that story?
Well, potentially, yes. And the Home Office, though, would dispute that anybody has disappeared. What they say is that they are confident that they will be able to locate all of those 5,700.
I don't know if you ever heard of a guy called, on YouTube, he's called Rich Hull, or Richard Hull.
Earmarked for
he does his computer gaming. He plays a lot of... what's that game called? Fallout game.
The sort of report.
He can't stop talking about me in his videos. I mean, he talks a lot about Fat Dan all the time.
Those different asylum seekers vary from one asylum seeker to the next. So while some in accommodation like hotels maybe have to report...
Not really played the game as such.
To Home
For a while.
Office reporting centres. There are others, they say, who are staying with family and friends.
Yeah, it's quite a big TV.
Looser arrangements.
It's not a huge TV, but it does the job.
Back to the point, they say that they are confident that they will be able to locate those that they have earmarked for deportation and be able to round them up and get them.
He's bored. He's a troller. Some people just troll on YouTube because they've got nothing better else to do.
In the number of
visas that have been handed
out, the government claiming victory.
They're trying to make themselves look cool.
Changes, or is this just one of those things?
Well, the government has always said that it wants to reduce the net migration figures into the country as well. Of course, a lot of that has actually been driven by student visas, and the number there is up again. It's very lucrative, of course, for universities across the country. But the difficulty, I think, with the students is that many of them are taking their families across. All those loopholes are being clamped down on. But that's good news, I think, to a small degree, that some of the visa granting, the visa grants have come down.
Well, I don't know what to say about that. Sure, we'll find something else to put on. After the adverts, obviously. Some more bloody adverts. Drives you insane.
Still a bit slow.
The world is on a knife edge. There's over 100 armed conflicts currently taking place right across the globe. Some of these are new, others have been going on for decades. But each week, we'll break down everything you need to know to understand the battles shaping the world today. Welcome to the War Zone. I'm Maddie Hale. This week, we're looking at Haiti and the country's brutal gang war. Haiti has long been blighted by conflict, but since the beginning in 2020, the gang war has led to over 6,000 deaths, including more than 1,500 this year already. Around 200 different gangs control 80 to 90% of the capital of Port-au-Prince. More than 360,000 have been forced to leave their homes, and 1.4 million people are currently at risk of starvation.
I'm alone.
Here to share his expert analysis on his author and journalist Michael Dybert, who's been following the conflict in Haiti for over 25 years. Michael, for someone who is completely unaware of what is happening or what has been happening in Haiti, in your words and experience, what is the situation?
Essentially, the situation as it exists in Haiti now is that you had kind of politically aligned gangs that had been used by various political actors in the country for about 20 years, a little more than that, that in recent years had become able to operate with an increased degree of autonomy, who now are basically kind of running wild and control about 80% of the capital and various other parts of the country as well. And they made, since the end of February, they made life a real hell for the citizens there, because they have kind of risen up in this coordinated uprising, taking over more areas of territory, displacing people, killing police and whatnot. And it remains a really thorny situation for any potential peacekeeping force that might come into the country.
Michael, as you said, a majority of the uprising and the conflict is taking place in that capital of Port-au-Prince. Physically, if you were to, visit there, what does the city actually look like?
I mean, in terms of the topography, it's actually the setting of it, the natural setting of it is quite beautiful. It's built around this sheltered bay, and you have these cloud-shrouded mountains rising in the distance. And when I first visited Haiti in the mid-1990s, I mean, people back then were talking about how degraded the city had become from its glory days. But compared to now, I'm sure it was quite placid, relatively speaking. But what you have now is you have a situation where these different neighborhoods are controlled by different armed groups, and so there's a great deal of kind of physical destruction in terms of burned buildings and burned cars and things like that. And there's also the danger of some of these armed groups are fighting with one another. They're fighting with the police. I have a friend who I was talking to recently who was standing on the street talking to someone, and his friend fell, and he thought he was having some sort of heart attack or something. Here it turned out he had been hit by a stray bullet. And things like that happen quite frequently in the capital of Haiti these days, unfortunately.
Michael, I want to get into who these gangs are. Can you walk me through this? Obviously, as I said in the intro, there's around 200 in the capital, but who are the main gangs that kind of operate and dominate the capital city?
Sure. I mean, there's one group that's based in a neighborhood called Aba Delma, or Lower Delma, which is named after this main thoroughfare in Port-au-Prince. That's run by a former police officer, Jimmy Cherizier, who's nicknamed Barbecue, who seems to be the one who the foreign press especially mostly focuses on. But there's gangs that have, I would say, substantially more men under arms and control more territory. For example, there's one in a neighborhood called Village de Dieu, Village of God, run by a guy called Izo, who's also a rapper. There's another one in a neighborhood called Grand Ravine that's led by a guy called Tilapli. One in a neighborhood called Tibois, and these two neighborhoods are, as you're going south out of Port-au-Prince, run by a guy called Crisla. And then as you go to the north and east of the capital, in kind of more quasi-rural areas or suburban areas, you have the Shen Machen, who are run by a guy called Vitalom Innocent, who's on the FBI's most wanted list. You have 400 Marozo, that's run by a guy called his nickname is Lamouche Sanjou, which basically translates as the kind of death comes without warning, I think you would say. So there's quite a lot of armed groups, and they also tend to be very fractious among themselves. So even though there's, in theory, this peace pact that they have among one another called Vivre Ensemble, live together, I think, it's only a matter of time before they start shooting it out with.
I don't know what to think about that.
One another again.
Well, kind of on that note, Michael, this conflict has obviously further escalated last week when these separate gangs, they've obviously come together to work together to lead this insurrection in Haiti, which led to the Prime Minister kind of having his hand forced and resigning. Can you walk me through this decision from Ariel Henry to the Prime Minister to resign over fears that he could have been killed by these gangs working together?
Yeah, hello.
Sure. I mean, essentially,
How's
so
it going?
as I noted before, I mean, a lot of these gangs historically have links with different political and economic actors in Haiti, and even some Haitian human rights groups have talked about how some of them have links to Ariel Henry's government itself.
Welcome to the stream.
So basically, when Ariel Henry was abroad in Kenya to sign this agreement to have a Kenyan-led peacekeeping force come into Haiti, on February 29th, the gangs rose up, and they said one of their conditions was that Ariel Henry must resign. So what took his place is a 7-member transition council, which also has 2 non-voting members. That's quite frankly made up of a lot of
no, it's not about Haiti.
Political parties that brought Haiti over the cliff in the first place. So it's a kind of odd transition to have the people who caused the mess in control of supposedly bringing the country out of it. Henri resigned,
News channel.
and then the council took over, and now they are electing today. Actually, they're supposed to announce who will be the president of the council, who is tasked with restoring security and holding new elections. There's been no elections in Haiti since 2016, and as you may know, the elected president, Jovenel Moïse, was assassinated in July of 2021.
Well, I want to get into the political situation, Michael, because obviously if you're new to even looking at Haiti, you would find it quite a bizarre political environment. Is the situation so chaotic and such anarchy that gangs basically run the political sphere in Haiti?
I mean, she sounds like Australian, but I could be wrong.
A question of
Australian news.
Some political and some economic actors exploiting the desperation in some of the most marginalized communities in Haiti, especially in Port-au-Prince.
Not too keen on the British Prime Minister, even though I'm from England as well. But our Prime Minister doesn't seem to be doing a lot, does he?
An increased autonomy of action and different income streams through kidnapping, through drug trafficking, and other kind of modes of operation. So they become less and less dependent on these patrons that they used to have. And now, I don't think they're as responsive. In fact, I know they're not as responsive. When these traditional patrons tell them to do something, their response is, why should we? We're kind of running our own show now.
Yeah,
nah, I don't think I could run the country well.
The conflict in Haiti has been going on for years. You could trace it back for decades even. But in 2024, there's been 1,500 deaths already related to gang violence. Why in 2024?
They wouldn't hire me to do the country, dude.
Yeah, I
mean, I've got good ideas. I mean, I'm autistic and ADHD. I mean, I do videos. That's what I like to do.
The weaker and weaker the state got. So the state that already had a really marginal presence in a lot of these deprived neighborhoods.
I probably would, yeah, but I don't know. They don't really go after
These
people.
armed groups became
I think you could. Yeah, probably
felt
could.
like they could operate with a lot more impunity. I will say, since February 29th, since this last chapter of the rebellion began, the Haitian police and Haitian army have behaved quite bravely in a lot of instances, kind of defending the airport, defending the National Palace.
I just like to cover the news and play my games and help people, and they help me, and give them my ideas and their
gunshots in the
ideas.
United States, which is another aspect of the conflict that's really problematic. Is that
That's very kind of you,
liberal gun laws in the United States have allowed a real river of iron to kind of flow south to Port-au-Prince for quite a number of years now.
Michael, kind of getting back into, I guess since February and this insurrection, the latest rebellion, as you say, one of the things that struck out to me is, gang members quite literally freeing thousands of criminals from jail. Can you walk me through what happened in this insurrection?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Haiti has kind of a history of politically significant jailbreaks, I guess you might say. There was one in 2002 in a northern city called Guanaïve, and there was another one in 2004 in Port-au-Prince. I mean, a lot of the gang members had been held at the Penitenciaire Nationale, which is the main kind of prison in downtown Port-au-Prince. It's fairly near the National Palace, actually. And, amid all of this chaos, these gang leaders.
I'm happy you guys and girls and ladies and gentlemen liking the videos. I do try my best, but
many people, including
everybody likes different things, you see.
It's time.
Got back
for
in the
more
adverts again, as you can see.
And more comfort with automated ventilation.
Adverts that make the money, I think. As I know, blame it on Rockstar for doing this.
Dimitri Herard, who was the former chief of security for Jovenel Moïse, who many believe may have been involved in his assassination. And so now, there have been
cheers, my friend. Thank you. Always helps to make another video.
Gang, who are known as 5 seconds, 5
subscribe and liking.
Helping to train these guys further in different elements of kind of, combat and fighting and things like that.
Michael, you mentioned this before, but in order for these gangs to, self-fund their operation, they carry out extortion through kidnapping. How common is this?
Extremely common, unfortunately. I mean, I don't think I know a single family in Haiti that hasn't been touched by kidnapping in some form. And some of the gangs, I would say, it's an industrial level industry at this point. I mean, they have many safe houses that are well guarded.
Addicted to sandwiches, eh? if you vote,
there's some gangs that treat
give a sandwich
captives more brutally than others, I would say. But still, it's gotten to a point where, I mean, driving south out of Port-au-Prince, north out of Port-au-Prince, or east towards the Dominican border is really, I mean, it's taking your life and your liberty in your hands, because you can be at any time. And actually,
I've just had a sandwich a minute ago.
I mean, I know that
it was bacon, egg, and
you have
meat.
to pay a toll basically to leave the country and to leave the city rather. And but sometimes they're still seizing people who they view as high value targets, basically.
Gang members
like pot noodles.
Sexual violence to kind of seek revenge on competitive gangs.
I like my pot noodle called a Bombay Bad Boy. It's very spicy chili, if you like that sort of thing. Or a mushroom and
of political terror in Haiti over, I would say, over the
there's
last
a mushroom one, isn't
years,
there?
but
And
especially
chicken
over
one,
the last
tomato
5 or
flavour.
6 years. And I mean, this is
Sweet and
something
sour.
that, when you think of how Haiti may reconstruct it after this chapter ends, I mean, there's certainly going to be a great need for counseling for
Beef pot
people
noodle.
who've been victims of this, because it's really something that has gone on almost
Spare rib
completely
pot
unpunished
noodle.
for a number of years now.
Michael, since that insurrection the last few months, how has the situation changed for more drastically worsened, I should say?
I do eat a lot of hot stuff, yeah.
Oh, I mean,
it's good for the nose.
Again, I mean, for example, up until last week, I believe, or a few days ago, there had been no planes.
Some people like the mild curries, but
February 29th. So you can imagine. I mean, you can't go out of the country by land, and now out of the city by land, and now you can't go by air either. Supposedly, they're going to try and restart the airport functioning in the next couple of days. But that was a scene of major battles between the security forces and the gangs. You also had a lot of problems at the port in terms of ships, with different supplies and things like that getting in, because the port of Port-au-Prince is really in one of the most contested and kind of dangerous gang areas downtown. And then, you also have...
I don't think the trolls can take hot
trauma,
spicy.
I would say, of basically living in prison.
They always
It's
go for
not
the
like
mild
you can go
or
out,
the non-flavour.
to enjoy the breeze in the late afternoon in, Upper Delma or in Paco or in Toujours, one of these neighborhoods in Port-au-Prince, because things are so dangerous. And I mean, that's a real trauma that Haitians have been living with for quite a number of years now, but it's gotten extremely severe since the end of February.
So, Michael, it's not just a gang war, it's a humanitarian crisis. You've got a population of 11.5 million Haitians and about 5 million at risk of starvation.
Yeah, that's correct. And I mean, the situation in terms of Haiti's ability to produce its own food, I mean, that's something that crisis kind of goes back to the mid-1990s. I mean, there was what they called a structural adjustment plan that was imposed on Haiti by kind of outside powers, that one of the conditions of it was essentially that Haiti would lower its tariff on imported rice, which maybe sounds like a kind of a minor thing, but that was one of the backbones of the rural economy in Haiti. And so Haiti was flooded by all this imported rice from places like Arkansas and whatnot, and the local farmers couldn't compete. A lot of them ended up moving into these really poor neighborhoods in the capital, and their sons became the first generation of these kind of gangsters in the late 1990s and early 2000s.
Well, in that time period, Michael, the United States was heavily involved, especially the Clinton administration. Did the US help or hurt the situation in Haiti?
I mean, having seen kind of diplomacy up close, I don't think there was this Machiavellian plan to kind of derail Haiti that some people think. I mean, I think that's giving a little bit too much credit for how high on the list of priorities Haiti was in Washington, D.C. But the U.S. government and others certainly have, with that example of the tariff on imported rice, for example, that was an extremely destructive thing for kind of Haiti's social fabric. I mean,
well, not more bloody adverts. These adverts drive you mad. Can't stand adverts.
Other thing,
get rid of the adverts.
Supported by the international community that turned out to be a disaster was the disbandment of the Haitian army in 1995. I mean, that was done by former President Jean-Bertrand Aristide, who then essentially, used these youth gangs as a bludgeon against his opponents because the army had ousted him and he wanted to get rid of them anyway. The army certainly had a history of human rights abuses and certainly should have been reformed. But
the army,
this power vacuum that a relatively small police force couldn't hope to fill.
Well, I want to get into that, Michael. What is the situation with the Haitian police? Are they completely overrun? Do they have an alliance to the gangs? Is it all very corrupt in a general sense?
I think a lot of people would say that the upper echelons of the police now are highly compromised. I mean, that's the opinion of most Haitians, I would say. However, I would say there's, in terms of the rank and file, I mean, you still have a lot of people who put that uniform on with pride every day and fight very bravely. I mean, they fought to defend the airport, the police and the army, for 2 days against hundreds of gang members who were attacking them with automatic weapons. Same with the palace. I mean, there's the main square in Port-au-Prince is the Champ de Mars, the plain of Mars, which I think if you know anything about mythology, the god of Mars, the god of war, it fits these days down there. But they've been fighting it out with the gangs on this main square in Port-au-Prince as well for now weeks. So I think there's still a lot of esprit de corps in the actual rank and file and the kind of base of the police, but certainly the politicians in Haiti have sought multiple times to compromise and politicize the institution.
What did you make of the UN claiming that Haiti needs at least 5,000, foreign police to be deployed to the country to fix the situation in the capital? Do you think that's enough?
I mean, I think one of the problems is I don't think it's impossible to kind of stabilize the security situation in the sense of could various militaries defeat, in terms of force of arms, these various gangs? Yes, I think they could. But the problem is if you don't change the material conditions in these neighborhoods where the gangs proliferate, we're going to be right back in the same situation in 5 years. I watched the UN come in 2004 after the overthrow of Aristide and then fight the gangs for 2 years, basically, in what we then thought was really horrific, but seems almost kind of Pollyanna-ish compared to what's going on now. But the only thing that finally kind of lowered the temperature a little bit was there was the election of René Préval in 2006, and he reached a kind of modus vivendi with the gangs where they lowered the level of violence, and there were some social programs and works in those neighborhoods. But significantly, the gangs did not disband; they never disappeared. And it was around that time when various political groups decided, okay, we're going to use this youth gang model that had been pioneered by Aristide and his party, La Valasse. But the other political parties saw that, and much to my horror and astonishment, instead of thinking it was terrible, they thought it was kind of a user's manual for how to proceed. And then you had this this infusion of links between these armed groups and politicians that kind of went across parties in Haiti's political system, which is how it existed up until very recently.
Michael, just finally, you've obviously written a book and you've visited Haiti various times and obviously our expert guest. What do you think is, the next phase of Haiti? How does either international interference or whatever, or the UN getting more involved, how do we fix the country to restore it to, that beautiful Caribbean island that it could be?
I think, there is a great deal of patriotism and heroism in average Haitians that you see every day who go about their lives, facing down situations and circumstances that I think would break most people. But I think what we need to do, the best aid that could be given to Haiti, so to speak, by the international community, is to kind of support the good actors and the decent actors in Haitian society. In
loads of land space,
I think one thing that could be really helpful would be to have some sort of, internationally supported but not run body.
Yeah, Mikey.
Organized crime and its connections.
Yeah, good man, you.
Political and economic actors.
How's it going, dude?
You had in Guatemala after the Civil War ended there in the mid-1990s. There needs to be some kind of sustained mechanism by which this can be prevented from happening.
Just watching some news, man.
There are people in Haiti who are capable of directing that.
Ain't too bad.
Michael Dibert, thank you so much for your time today.
Just seeing what's on the TV, there's not a great deal, but there's a few things on that they're showing, but it is what it is. Just trying to flick through all the channels, but finding things to watch can sometimes be difficult. You just got to keep searching. Trying to find something else to put on.
Guess what, folks? This is quite a moment. The NHS has finally, the NHS, the health service, you know, full of
GB
doctors
News,
and
yeah.
nurses, medically qualified
Talk TV, this
people,
one.
they have finally conceded, whoop whoop, champagne corks, that a person's sex is an immutable biological fact. In other words, you cannot change it. Who knew? I mean, who knew?
Who knew?
We all did. Why didn't the NHS? It's absolutely insane. But the Health Secretary, Victoria Atkins, while trying to talk common sense, is still wittering on about asking women in women's wards what they'd like to be called. Call them women or Mary or whatever their name is. Unbelievable. When will this mad...
Nah, the games are quite boring. I mean, probably eventually I'll play games again. It's just the same game over and over again.
Well, good evening, Kevin. Nice to see you again.
Go on, sorry. Take it away. Take it away.
Take it away.
Possibly what's been going on. I think, I'm pretty sure that both doctors and nurses would need a good grade of A-level in biology to get into their med school or their nursing training college at the university. So it's really been a bit odd. And it's been promoted actually from NHS England, and it's been promoted at local level. Again, they all say, well, it's very small numbers of people, but it's not small numbers of people when you think of wards full of particularly women who may be faced with having a man, albeit a man in a dress when they are admitted, and a bit of lippy, but actually they are men.
Yeah.
And there's no, a man can't turn into a woman can't turn into a man. They can like to claim they're women, trans women, and they like to feel that they're women. I understand that, and nobody wants to be hurtful or mean to these people, absolutely not. However, the idea particularly of having trans women who are fundamentally men sleeping in the next bed to you or having care in the next bed to a lot of women in a women's ward is simply not acceptable. It never has been and it never will be. And I'm really pleased that Victoria Atkins has come out and said, well, basically this stuff has got to stop.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But she did actually, in an interview with Times Radio, actually said, well, of course you do. We don't we're going to try and keep biological males out of women's wards. But when the women turn up, we'll ask them what they'd like to be called. What's that mean? What does that mean? Why have we got to ask women what they'd like to be called?
Well, actually, Kevin, if you look at a 7 million plus waiting list for treatment, people who have been referred to treatment, but the treatment hasn't yet started. If you look at the challenges faced by the NHS, why on earth would you want to waste your time? To me, it kind of is almost designed to deflect from
I had a sandwich before.
Issues
Did you have anything to eat?
The NHS. Oh, yes, it took a long time to admit somebody and there were other people waiting. But, you know, we did get their pronouns right and this was so important. No, it's not important. Let's concentrate. We're there to help people, to get them well again, to keep them alive sometimes, you know, and let's ignore this nonsense that's been going on about pronouns and you know, chest feeding and it's a deflection.
It sounds like the sort of backlash against all this woke nonsense is at long last
chicken,
happening in the NHS. But
chicken's good.
with all these issues, I always have to ask the question: how did we get there in the first place? How did it come to be that, as I said just introducing you earlier, Martin, that doctors and nurses went round telling people that trans women were women? They're not. They're trans women, as you quite rightly say. I totally respect trans women and trans men. You live your life however you want to do. But do not tell me to accept you are biologically a woman. You're not. Why did doctors and nurses work for an organisation that tried to tell us that that was the case? Tried to tell us that the truth was a lie?
What you will hear is that they will use a term like there's a lot of pressure on us to do this. The pressure, I mean, let's be honest, the people,
don't watch
the
him.
sort of mermaids and others in the world, these large so-called charities, which are really consultancies in wokeness, they had some quite sort of aggressive approaches. And I think genuinely people were quite scared of going against that particular grain. It was the same with the Black Lives Matter movement, which the NHS, both in terms of its patient profile and its staff profile, were some of the most diverse groups of people you could ever imagine. And yet, when I was still with the NHS in mid-2020, there was pressure from even senior executives to sign up to this sort of stuff, to make statements.
I haven't drunk any beer for a long time.
Statements about it. And it was...
I gave it up for a couple of years.
We were under a lot of pressure. The pressure comes from very aggressive lobby groups who are good, and they get to the politicians and they get to people in the public sector particularly, and they almost force people to go down this road. And my message to people in the NHS who still work there and the staff and the doctors and the nurses is don't be bullied. Don't be bullied. The majority of people who want the services of the NHS men don't want to be asked if they're pregnant. And men don't want to be asked either, and women don't want to be asked if they've got any problems with their reproductive organs. It's all a nonsense.
I know.
It's a nonsense.
I mean, I think I've told you this before. I've got this kind of fantasy that one day I have to go to a hospital to get an X-ray. And according to NHS regulations, this is what they have to do. Everyone, they have to. The first thing they have to say to me, great hunking bloke, obvious bloke, is, "Are you pregnant?" Because of course, an unborn fetus can be affected by X-ray rays.
True.
So there's radioactive rays. So that's a good question for women. But they should stop insulting people like me or you, our intelligence, by asking blokes with beer guts and beards whether or not they're pregnant. They should stop this, shouldn't they?
I think I would say, if I was ever asked that question, I think I would say, well, actually, I don't think I am. And really, if you look at me, aren't I rather old to be pregnant?
My fantasy is that I go into an X-ray and they say, "Are you pregnant?" I say, "Well, take a wild guess." I mean, it's unbelievable, isn't it? I mean, the last sort of point, really, let's go general on this NHS issue. We've got the next health secretary is likely to be Labour's Wes Streeting. Seems like a decent enough guy. He's making good noises about the NHS, but my fear is he'll go the way of all health secretaries and not get to grips with what the NHS needs, and that is root and branch reforms. It needs to stop spending millions of pounds on pointless diversity officers, and it needs to drastically reduce the 3,500 medically unqualified middle managers who earn more than £100,000 a year. That's what Wes Streeting should get to grips with. Do you trust him to do it?
No. And actually, I don't think any politician is or ever has been actually competent to reorganise the NHS. It needs somebody from outside, in fact, outside the public sector. And it actually, the key to reorganisation is liberation, is to allow those local health systems to work and to give them the freedom to do it.
Tell you what, I'm holding the phone with my hand, as you can see.
But the idea that Wes Streeting is going to come along and say, "Oh, well, I'm going to give you better IT," and I'm going. In fact, the last time a Labour government tried to give better IT was Tony Blair, and they wasted billions on a system that didn't even work.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, I mean, also this wokery, the NHS now say, oh, well, we're not going to use terms like chest feeding anymore. Again, my question is, why did you ever use that term in the first place? And only recently they published a sort of pamphlet on motherhood and pregnancy, and it never once used the word women or mothers. I mean, are they going to stop this nonsense, do you believe?
Well, the crazy thing is, Kevin, even if all of these things have been the right thing to do, the timing of doing them when the NHS is under such pressure is ludicrous. Focus on the real mission that the NHS should be on. You wouldn't go into war with a lot of soldiers and saying, actually, you didn't quite tie your bootlaces properly. You get in there and fight to achieve what you've got to achieve. And that's what the NHS really needs to do. It needs to get itself on a footing that says, look, we've got long waiting lists. We've got some very sick people who didn't present to their GP during COVID. We've got a backlog to deal with. And actually, that's what we've really got to concentrate on doing now. For all the peripheral thing, all the diversity officers, they've got the same thing, Kevin, on net zero people who've got roles in. And
what's that got to do with the NHS exactly?
It's not the issue.
It's insane. It's insane. I hope they get things, put things right. But as you say, after so many years of this, I don't trust that happening. But let's keep our fingers crossed. Martin, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. Martin Gower there, former NHS Trust Chair. Should I say chairman? Because he's a bloke, isn't he? Chairman. You're not allowed to say that anymore. Why can't you say chairman? Anyway.
Well, what can I say about that? Not a great deal. Oh, okay. I'm going to try and charge my phone up now, and thank you for all joining me, and I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy, peace.